Hello everyone, my name is Skaara and I come from Norway and I'm a PH patient. I have made what I call a survival guide, and this is kind of my personal guide. So it might not be for everyone, but maybe some part of this can be used by others, other PH patients. And maybe it can also be an inspiration to you as a patient or carer. So my journey started with shortness of breath. And I guess this is very normal for most PH patients. This is the first symptoms that they notice. And I noticed this in 2003. I had just been through a couple of ablations, it's called. It's when they go in and work on your heart because of irregular heartbeats. So I had developed irregular heartbeats, atrial fibrillation, and flutters for some years, and it became chronic at the end, and I needed operation to correct it. And after that, I experienced shortness of breath. So I went to the hospital and my doctor, and I complained, and they did a bicycle test. Everything turned out to be normal. My oxygen levels were as expected. I achieved what was expected on the bicycle. And they basically said, you just need to go home and maybe exercise and see if you can improve your condition. And I especially remember one of the nurses said, maybe your standards are just too high. And I've been thinking about this afterwards because this was maybe one of the reasons why it took me a while before I went back to the doctor and complained. But I got gradually worse, and 2 years later, it was no question that I was sick, because then I started having problems walking up stairs and things like this. So I went back to the hospital, and a lung doctor put oximeter on my finger, and we walked in the steps of the hospital, and it was very clear that something was wrong with my lungs because my oxygen level fell quickly. I was sent to the National Hospital in Norway, and in just a matter of a couple of days, they found out what was wrong with me. So they did a lot of tests, plus a right heart catheterization, which is the gold standard of when you're being diagnosed with PH. And there was no question, I had PH. And my pressures were actually pretty high at that point. And this was a big shock for me. This was in 2005. And I remember sitting in the doctor's office after the right heart catheterization. I sat there together with my wife at that time and my oldest son, and the doctor came in. He was kind of serious, and he told me that there was no question I had PH. And I don't really understand or know why I said this, but the first thing that popped into my mind was, will I be able to be a grandfather? And I asked this question to the doctor, and he said, I don't see why not. But at the same time, I could see that he quickly glanced over at my son to see how old he was. And my son at that time, oldest son, was in his late teenager years. And my son was crying, my wife was crying. I guess I was not crying, but I was, it was, of course, shocked for me. And I was sitting there thinking about life and death, and if I would survive this and how long I would survive it. So my first reaction that day and the days to come was anger. I was very angry at my body, because this was a body that I had been treating very well. I had always exercised. I've been in very good shape. I ate healthy food. I didn't even drink coffee. I was very moderate with alcohol. I never smoked. And then this was what the body did to me, gave me a serious and chronic illness. Here is from the squash court. I played squash a couple of times every week, and I was in good shape. But then after a while, it actually didn't take too long, maybe just a few days or maximum a week. Then I accepted what happened. And I accepted that I was sick. And together with the acceptance came also a reaction of determination. I was determined to live as long as possible with this disease. And I was determined to live well, and I was determined to do whatever I could not to make this disease worse. So if I got worse, it should not be because of my lifestyle or anything I've done. This is my thoughts I had at this point. So I searched on the net. I found a book called The Survival Guide that was made by the American PH Association. I ordered this book, and then I started making my own survival guide. I started listing things that I thought would be important now that I had gotten sick. And it became a pretty long list. And when I looked at it, I saw that I could group it into 7 different categories. And what I will do today is I will go through these 7 categories with you and list some of the things that I thought was important at that point. So let's start with the first category, and this is to reduce stress. Because stress is not good for anyone, and especially if you have PH, it's not good. It can actually increase the pressure. So the first thing I had to consider was my job. I had a pretty high position in a large computer company. I was a manager there, and a lot of people were working for me, and it was quite a stressful job. And I realized that if I continued with this job, it would be difficult for me, and it would be difficult to maintain a non-stressful life. So I started working 50% instead of 100%. And I became a project manager instead of a manager. And I took on projects that I felt were not too hard for me to handle. And it really helped me a lot to just work these 50% instead of 100%. So I realized that people are different. For some people, their job is very, very important. And maybe it's so important that working even after PH is full-time is very important for someone. But you need to consider if it is very stressful, then you should maybe reconsider your work status, like I did. So, as I said, I worked 50%. So I guess I worked 50% from 2005 until 2012. So 5 years. And at that point, I decided I would stop working altogether. So in 2012, I retired. And then I got more involved in patient work. First of all, the Norwegian Association, which I started right after I got sick. And then later I started working for the European Association, where I still work today. When I was young, I was a student. Then I got into meditation. And this was a great way for me to reduce stress at that point. And then when I got sick, I started resuming this meditation. And for me, it worked really nice. Now, I have not been able to keep it up, but sometimes I still use the technique to meditate, and it's great stress relief. And maybe you have something else that you do. And so instead of meditation, maybe you have some other type of activity that you know is nice for you, and in a way that you kind of de-stresses you. So you should try to find some activities that is good for you. And of course, after you get sick, your priorities are kind of different. Work, career, and the big push I had at my job to get into better positions and climb on the career ladder. This is something that was not important for me after a while, and actually spending time with family and friends was much more important. I had great support from my family. My two sons were exceptional. This is my youngest son. We had a campaign in PHA Europe called Time Matters, and he contributed to this campaign. And it was very touching for me to read his answers. He was studying economy, and he said that one of the reasons he did this was to be able to contribute to medical research and so on by getting a government-related job and help influence the money flow. So he was very supportive, and now after all these years, he finished his master's, and he's working for a large Norwegian bank at the moment. And that's perfectly fine, because here in Norway we have very good conditions for patients, and money is spent on medication and research and so on. Now, my oldest son, as you can see here, he's a great athlete, and he used his athletic abilities to support me. So he played basketball in all his youth, and he became really good. He was even on the national team. And one time when they played a match that was sent on TV, then he got all his players, he and all his players, comrades, they played the match with blue lips. And when the opposing team heard about this, they actually put on blue stuff on their lips as well. And of course, this created a lot of news, and the biggest TV stations picked it up, the newspapers and so on. And it was kind of emotional that the son would play for his sick father. I just want to show you that my son, he is in fantastic physical shape. And he definitely don't have PH, that's for sure. So for instance, look at this. This was just 1 year ago or something. So you can see he has this basketball jumps. He does not have any problems dunking the basketball. So we ended up on national TV, me, my son, and also my doctor. And they asked us questions about this basketball match, And also we talked about pH and I was able to explain all the symptoms of pH and so on. And then we had a net meeting afterwards where me and my doctor, we answered questions that were sent in by the viewers. So this created a lot of awareness for pH, which of course was what I intended with this, and also what my son intended, in addition to just show his support to me, I guess. So when you think about stress, then I guess what I feel is really important is to try to stay positive. Because almost no matter what situation, there's two ways of looking at it. You can either look at it in a positive way or a negative way. Well, of course, getting PH is not very positive. But instead of dwelling on all the things I can't do that I did before, I've started thinking about all the things that I still can do and try to look at things from the positive side. And this is something that I would recommend for everyone, because if you start to dig yourself into a hole where everything is dark and you think about your terrible disease and all this, this will lead to no good. So much better just to look positive on things and accept the way it is, and accept and understand that there are still tons of things you can do, and you can have a great life still, even if you have a serious chronic illness. So this is depicted in this small cartoon where you see this guy say, "Someday we will all die, Snoopy." I guess this is something that we PH patients unfortunately think about, that we will die, and maybe in not too long. But then Snoopy says, it's true, but all other days we will not. And this is really important to understand, that even if you're sick, you're not dead, you're still alive. And you can definitely have a really nice and fulfilling life, which I really have felt I've had since I got sick in 2005. And I think this has helped me actually to help my disease also, so that I have not deteriorated much since I was diagnosed. On the other hand, maybe the opposite. So this is something I'll get more into later in the presentation. So what did I do? I started playing backgammon, because backgammon was something I played a little bit before, not too much, but all these other sports that I had before, I couldn't do anymore because of my lungs. But I'm kind of a competitive person, and playing backgammon was great fun for me. I did not need to have good lungs for this, and still I could get outlet for my competitive mind. So I started playing backgammon at a serious level. I started reading books, started practicing, and so on. And I became Oslo champion in, I can't remember when it was, maybe 2009 or something, 2-3 years after I started playing. And remember, I took this picture, and I was very happy. I came home and I showed it to my wife, and I said, "Look, I won the championship." And she said, "Well, that's great, but who is this blonde girl standing behind you?" I guess I didn't show her all the pictures that were taken that day. But the whole idea for me is that this is a great activity. I get my mind off pH, and I can compete on equal level with the other guys that plays backgammon. And in 2013, I became Norwegian champion. So I don't show you this to brag about my backgammon abilities, maybe just a little bit, but I show you this so that maybe you can think about yourself and what is it in your life that reduces stress? What kind of activity can you do? I choose backgammon. Maybe you choose something totally different. Another thing that I really like is photography. So this is something I didn't do too much of before, and now I start to do more and more of it. So I don't know if you can see it, but all the way out here, there's a lighthouse. This is in a small group of islands between Norway and Iceland. It's called Faroe Island. This is where my mom came from. And here I combine two things that I really love to do now. I love to walk and hike, and also I like to do photography. Here's another thing that I do. I do biking, and I have an electric bike, and this is really great fun because with an electric bike you kind of forget you're sick because things go really easy. So this is, I think it's a full day outside Oslo, and over here by the mountains. This is where I lived at that time. So the next category was to keep informed. So I quickly joined some discussion forums on the internet, and I tried to learn from other patients, and especially from those patients that had survived this disease for a long time. One of them that I learned, that I got to know from this was the first patient that I met after I got sick. His name was Ralf Schmiedl from Germany. So I saw that he was a person with a great knowledge, and he had lived with PH for a long time. So I invited him to Norway. He came. We became good friends, and we've had good contact ever since. And actually, just a few weeks ago, he got new lungs, and he's doing really well. So he's lived with this disease for very many years. And joining a patient association, I would say, is a must. Because in an association, you get qualified, good information, you meet other patients, and so on. And studies have shown that if you join an association, you actually do better than those that don't. And when I speak about do better, I'm talking about mostly on the mental level. But I guess also if you mentally do better, you physically also do better. And also I started reading some medical articles about my disease. I felt it was important. I think we're all different here, but it's been a lot of talk about patient empowerment. The fact that patients themselves should learn about their disease. Because in one way, I feel I'm the utmost expert on me, because I know my body. I've lived with it all my life. And I kind of view my doctor as just an assistant. So I like to learn as much as possible, and then I'm able to, when I meet the doctor, to discuss with him, and together with him decide what's the optimal medication for me, for instance. But I guess there is a danger in all this, and the danger is that if you do too much of this, then you can kind of be preoccupied by your disease, and we don't want this either. You still need to have your main focus being somewhere else, not to sit and read medical articles all day. So, but a little bit, I think it's important. And I'm not afraid to ask a lot of questions when I meet doctors and specialists. And often I write down before I go and meet my doctor. I write down my questions because it's very easy that you kind of forget what you're supposed to ask about. And as I said, to learn from these long-time survivors. There is a reason why they lived a long time. And one reason could, of course, be the type of pH they have. But another reason, which I feel pretty confident about, is that they have done something right, in order to live so long. So living healthy, a new category here. I've always been occupied by always thought it was important that I ate good food. And what is good food for a PH patient? I guess what we have in our lungs, heart and lungs, could be said to be an inflammation. So to eat food that are so-called non-inflammatory is very important, and to avoid food that create more inflammation. And what kind of food is that? Well, no surprise, it's natural food. So it's food that has not been processed much. It's vegetables, fruits, nuts, eggs, beans, and it's, for instance, fatty fish like salmon, like you see here. Ginger, you can see there on the left. So this kind of food is kind of optimal for a PH patient. And what foods should you avoid? Well, definitely avoid a lot of sugary food. Avoid a lot of dark meat. Avoid alcohol, of course, if you have too much of it. Smoking, definitely no smoking. I know there's still some PH patients that smoke, but this is a big no-no for a PH patient. So basically everything that's really processed, that's far from its natural state, like cakes, white bread, where the grain is, there's just white grain left, white flour. So darker bread, if you eat bread and so on. If you're thirsty, don't drink sugary drinks, drink water. I even take it to the extreme that I try to avoid, for instance, drinking a lot of juice, because there is also a lot of sugar in that. So I drink water and I eat orange and an apple and so on. Another thing is sunlight and vitamin D. And this could be a problem, especially for us that live out here in the north, because during winter time there is not much sunshine, and a large part of the day is almost like the night. It's very dark, and if you go up to North Norway, it's no sun for a couple of months. Because I watched a TED talk with a doctor that talked about the Mediterranean diet. And he said, well, maybe it's not as simple as this, that it's only the diet that makes people in the Mediterranean have less heart problems. So maybe it's even because they are exposed to more sunlight than we are. So sunlight is important. And what do you do if you cannot have a lot of sun? Vitamin D. And almost all people here in Norway have too little vitamin D in their blood. And this was also the case with me. I went to the doctor and had it checked, and it was very low. And I started taking vitamin D pills, or one pill every day, except for the summertime when I'm exposed to sunlight. And I really felt it helped my general condition, because in all my life I've had the flu or cough and things like this every year. And after I took vitamin D, and this was when I passed 50, I had the first year in my life without any flu. This has continued. I'm almost never sick anymore. So I think it definitely does something to your immune system. So please check your vitamin D level. And also it helps, vitamin D helps to expand the blood vessels. And this is what we want and need as PH patients. And also I make sure that I exercise daily. No, I cannot do like I did before. I cannot play squash like you saw I did many years ago. I cannot run and all this, but I can walk. And walking for a PH patient is really, really healthy and really good. So I just decided that, well, let me talk about this first. You might wonder, what on earth is this? Especially if you're a woman, maybe you don't understand. But this is a urinal. And there is a picture of a small fly there. And what does this have to do with pH? Well, the fact is that with this little fly, men will get closer and aim at the fly, and in this way spill less urine on the floor. And this is a really easy way to change someone's behavior, just to put a little fly in there. And then you change the behaviors of men, and it makes it easier and more clean than before. So here is a couple of other examples. So what can you do as a PH patient to do something really easy to influence your behavior, to live more healthy? Well, I got myself a personal trainer, because then this person will push me to do some exercise. And Nico, my personal trainer, really pushed me. He pushes me every day. It was kind of strange, because my wife really also liked this personal trainer. And after a while, she actually got kind of in love with him. And he got totally infatuated by her and in love with her as well. But really, it doesn't matter too much to me, because I also love Nico. Nico is the sweetest little dog. And he pushes me. He is my personal trainer, because 2 times every day, he wants to go outside. And I have to go outside if it's nice, if it's raining, if it's snowing. I go outside 2 times every day. So this is just a small thing we did to get Nico, buy Nico, and then it made me change my behavior. or at least push me so that I maintain my good behavior of doing some exercise. So my exercise is walking the dog. Also, I like technology. Here's an Apple Watch. And for those of you that are familiar with Apple Watch, you know that you have 3 rings. So the watch will kind of keep track of your activity level, and then you're supposed to try to close these rings during a day. And for me, this is also another trick to kind of push me to make sure that I do my daily exercise. And I also use a computer program to record the exercise that I've done. So here is an old one from 2013. You can see the track that I went, and it will record all my other sessions. And for me to go in and look at this and find out all the days and that I've been exercising, and if there are some special days that I maybe miss, then it gets me motivated to keep on pushing myself to always do a little exercise. And as a PH patient, we have good and bad days. And if you have a bad day, okay, well then you don't push yourself so much. You just take a short little trip. And if you have a good day, then you can push yourself a little more. So as I said, I got myself a great electric bike, Swiss quality, and I often go biking. And it's the greatest feeling because for me, it makes me feel almost healthy. I have no problems keeping up with healthy people on a bike. Yeah, of course, they don't have the battery to help them, but still makes me feel great. I can go for a long time and see a lot of good nature and still feel great when I come back. And if I feel tired during the trip, I can just ask the engine to give me a little bit more boost, or I can just stop pedaling for a little while to get my breath back. And it's, for me, perfect exercise. So now I've had many thousand kilometers on this bike. A lot of good, nice hours that I spent. Also, a rehab for a PH patient is very important. And I read about the rehab in Heidelberg in Germany, where you have Professor Grünich and his team. You should also check out Grünich's presentation, by the way, in this conference, because there he will talk more about the work he's doing. So here we have 6 PH patients and our trainer. And I stayed there for 3 weeks. I got to practice my school German, and it was just the best time. And what's really good about a rehab stay like this is that you get to know your body better, your body and your pH. What are your abilities? What can you do? How much can you push yourself? And it's still safe for you as a PH patient. Because if you go to a regular rehab for heart patients, what you will quickly discover is that the exercise and things they do is much too hard for you. So a normal rehab for a heart patient would be too tough. You should definitely go to a rehab for PH patients. And we had a lot of fun there. We biked every day, 16 minutes of biking, 2 minutes really light warm-up, 2 minutes really light cool-down. So that left 12 minutes. And it was 1 minute, very, very easy, and 1 minute, and I would call it still easy, but a little bit harder. But still, I felt that this was very, very easy exercise. But the clue was we did it every day. And I thought, this really can't help too much because it feels so easy for me. And also we did some breathing techniques. And this is also important for a PH patient. And also we have a presentation in the conference about breathing and yoga. So you should definitely check out these presentations. So let's look at the short-term results I had from this 3 weeks of rehab stay. So day number 2, we went to Dr. Grünig's clinic, Taurus Clinic, and did a lot of tests. And one of the tests, in addition to all the blood tests and spirometry and all these things, was a biking test. And while I was biking, he was doing an echo of my heart, and he was checking my pressure, estimating my pressure. They were checking my blood pressure, of course. They were checking my O2 level and so on. So here you can see that the last 2 minutes, the resistance of the bicycle was 125 watts. My heart rate was almost 130 beats per minute. And I went from resting blood pressure, 110/70, which is quite normal for a PH patient to have a low blood pressure. Many have even lower than this, and so do I if I measure it in the morning. But it went all the way up to 180/95. And this is actually a good sign. It means that your heart has the ability to work harder when needed. And my maximum VO2, meaning the maximum amount of oxygen that I could get into my cells, was 18.4. And this is of course lower than the person that's not sick, but for a PH patient, I think it's quite okay. And my saturation went down. I guess normally I have a saturation between 96 and 98 at rest, and it went down to 93, which is not so bad. And this is also something I should say, that they always wanted our saturation to be over 90. So when we exercised, we were told not to exercise so hard that the oxygen level dropped under 90. And at this point, I was breathing 73 liters of air in a minute. And my systolic pulmonary pressure, estimated by Dr. Grünig, was 55 millimeter mercury. And on a Borg scale, which means how hard I estimate this exercise to be, from 1 to 20, I thought it was about 15. So of course I could have pushed myself even harder, but this he wanted me to stop at this point. As you can see, my heart rate is only 129, and I think my maximum heart rate would probably be between 150 and 160. So after 3 weeks, we went back, and we had been doing very light exercise, as I said. And I thought there is no way that this will make any difference because it's been so light. When I did the bicycle test, the bicycling every day, it was almost never that my heart rate went over 100. It was usually under 100. So I biked until my heart rate was comparable to what I had on day 2. And also you can see my blood pressure went, it was a little lower when I went there the second time. And it went up almost as much as the other time. And the systolic pressure he measured was the same, And also I pushed myself to level 15 out of 20. But look at this. Instead of biking 125 watts, I biked 150 watts. And my max VO2 was 19.6, so it had gone up from 18.4 to 19.6 in only 3 weeks. And my saturation was still at 96. And I was breathing less air, 66 liters of air instead of 73. So even though I was biking with harder resistance, and even though I was breathing less than before, I had more oxygen in my body. And my VO2 had improved more than a point in just 3 weeks from super easy exercise. So I just can't stress enough that you should try to go to rehab and learn how you can exercise. And please be very, very careful if you do stuff on your own. It's always good to get a PH specialist to help you get started. Because what most people do when they want to exercise is they think about exercise as they thought about exercise before they got sick. No pain, no gain, and this kind of stuff. That you really have to push yourself really hard, but you really don't. You just have to be consistent. You have to bicycle these 12 minutes every day, easy bicycling. Or you have to walk a little bit every day and so on. So if you just continue doing stuff constantly and also listen to your body, don't overdo. This is very important. And if you overdo, you will notice right away that you get too tired. Then you might improve. Because when I was diagnosed in 2005, my max VO2 was 15. And then 5 years later, when I went down to Heidelberg, my max VO2 was 18, as you can see. And 3 weeks later, it was almost 20. And now, when I tested myself last time, I had a little over 30. And this is almost at the normal level. So from being diagnosed in 2005 with a max VO2 of 15, I now, 16 years later, have almost doubled my max VO2. So I'm doing much better than I originally did. And I'm still on monotherapy, on only one medication. But please, I cannot stress this enough. Don't overdo. Very careful exercise, but consistent. And listen to your body. If you feel tired, do less. If you feel good, do a little more. So this was in Faroe Island again, this group of islands between Norway and Iceland. And I usually go there almost every year to visit my family on my mother's side. And me and my cousin, we often walked and hiked up to this mountain peak. It's not too high, it's about 550 meters, I think. But after I got sick, I thought there's no way I can get up to the top again. But after little bit exercise every day, and after 10, 15 years, I got up to the top again. And this was a great feeling and a great achievement for me. And it made me realize that I actually can do much more than I thought I ever could. So as you can imagine, to sit up there and and almost feel like I did before I got sick was just an amazing feeling. So when it comes to live healthy, I think also you should consider some daily supplements. I talked about vitamin D before. Q10, some people talk very warmly about. I don't take it myself, but this is maybe something you should look into. Omega-3, I do take. I take cod liver oil, which is something that many Norwegians take on a daily basis. And omega-3 is very non-inflammatory and very, very good for you. It also contains vitamin D. If you take multivitamin, be very careful about vitamin K, because vitamin K can make your blood thicker. Another thing I was thinking was I need to get plenty of sleep. So I try to do that. I try to sleep as long as my body wants to sleep, which in my case is about 7.5 hours. Avoid infections. Of course, this is something that's very on people's mind today because of the COVID situation. But as a PH patient, you should always, COVID or not, be very careful and not get the flu and an infection. Because if you get a flu and a cold, then in worst case, it will develop into a pneumonia and so on, and it could become serious for you as a PH patient. And if you do get sick, then maybe you need to use antibiotics at an earlier stage than normal, just to avoid that it develops into something real serious. Your gums are important, because if you have tooth problems, you can actually get infection that goes into your bloodstream, and it can go into your heart and damage your heart. So make sure to brush your teeth well and go regularly to the dentist to get your teeth clean. I even practice my mind. So I use an internet site where I can do some different exercises to try to keep my mind fresh and healthy. Next category, check health status. So it's important that you have regular and frequent checks, because if you do, you will quickly notice if your pH starts to deteriorate, and maybe you need to introduce a second or a third drug, or a different drug, or something, or maybe transplant, consider transplant. So to go and check your health regularly is very important. I even do some self-tests. I haven't done this for a while, but in the beginning I did my own 6-minute walks to see if I could walk as long as I did before. And in this way I would try to detect early if I got worse. But I've been very stable and I can actually walk very well. And I often do some of the same routes when I walk with Nico, my personal trainer. And when I walk these routes, then I can feel very quickly if I have a good day or bad day and so on. So I don't feel like I need to run these tests anymore, because I can quickly feel if I have a pattern of several days of low energy and not being able to walk as well as I did before. You should keep track of your weight. And this is not only because you should avoid gaining fat, but also because if you suddenly start to gain weight, it might be water. So this is something you should keep track of. Here you can see me. I weigh 76 kilos plus minus, and little deviation is normal, a couple of kilos. But if you suddenly start to weigh 5-6 kilos more than normal, then it's probably water, and you need to go and talk to your doctor. In my case, I actually got a side effect of my medication. So I got cataract. So I needed to have an operation to correct it. But, you know, it's like I said about positive and negative thing. This actually turned out to be pretty positive for me because I always had a bad eyesight. And when they had this operation on my eyes to replace my lens inside the eye, they replaced it so that I see perfect now, without having to wear contact lenses or glasses. Next category, use optimal medication. This is, of course, important so that you don't deteriorate. So you should keep in close dialogue with your PH doctor. Talk about your situation, discuss with him, and that's why it's so important to be empowered as a patient, that you have the knowledge needed in order to be able to speak his language, his and hers language, and be part of the team that it takes to make sure that you have that you get optimal treatment. And maybe for you, quality of life is important in a different way than for the doctor. So maybe there is some type of medication that's maybe more right for you than if only the doctor would decide. So this is important, I feel. Avoid the risk conditions. And for instance, we know that high altitude is bad for a PH patient, because once you get up to high altitude, there's little oxygen. And especially if you exert yourself, if you do exercise in high altitude, it can make your pH worse. So I try to avoid altitudes over 800,000 meters, because then I know the oxygen level is lower. And if I go to these kind of altitudes, I'm very careful not to exert myself. I try to be as still as possible, not walk too much, and so on. Extreme warm and cold weather is not good either for us as PH patients. And it might be difficult to avoid if you live in an area with very cold or very warm weather, but if it's very warm, I guess you need to stay inside in an air-conditioned room, and if it's very cold, then stay inside in a warmer room. And for me, I've been on the East Coast a couple of summers with extreme humidity, and I just cannot tolerate it anymore. That this is, I just feel that this is really bad for my health. So I totally avoid it. One thing they talked about in Heidelberg was actually that swimming is not the best for a PH patient. And the reason is that when you are underwater, when it's only the head above the water, then you have pressure of the water on your chest. And this pressure could make it harder for you to breathe. So in Heidelberg, they suggest to avoid swimming if you're a PH patient. And you should also be a little aware of these if you want to take long plane trips. My son played basketball, as I said, and one time his team went to China to play there, and I really wanted to go too. So I went to the hospital, and we did some tests where they were testing my blood as I was breathing in air with low oxygen to simulate how things would be in an airplane. Because, you know, when you're inside an airplane, you get less oxygen. And it's about the same as if you're on about 2,300, 400 meters in altitude. So it really will affect you as a PH patient and also as a normal healthy person. So I've had my oxygen meter a couple of times with me when I fly, and then I see how my oxygen drops. And even with my son, who's really healthy and super fit, it drops. So after I did these tests at the hospital, they said, you're okay. You don't need any oxygen on the plane, but just be careful. No activity. So sit very close to the bathroom, so that if you need to go to the bathroom, then you don't walk too much and so on. Be equipped. I like to be able to check my pulse, so I don't want my pulse to get too high. But I guess this is a little bit the same as with these self-tests. I start to know my body so well that I start to feel when my pulse is getting too high. And for me, it's about around 120, 130. If I get over that, I start to have extra beats. I start to have a burning sensation in my lungs and so on. So you need to find your correct pulse level. And if you do some exercise, whatever it is, make sure that your pulse does not go too high. And an oximeter is always good to have, especially if you go on a plane trip. And also when you exercise, as I said, you should probably avoid having an oxygen level lower than 90. So if your oxygen level falls below 90 very easily, then maybe you should use oxygen supply when you exercise. Here's an altimeter, so you can measure how high you are above sea level. As I said, I try to avoid going higher than 10,000 meters. So maybe this is something also you should consider getting if you don't know the altitudes where you go. So I started this talk talking about when I got diagnosed, that I was afraid maybe I would not be able to get grandchildren, experience that. And now I'm not so afraid of this. So this is a picture I've taken of me before I got sick with the son of my sister. So this is not my grandchild, but just like an illustration. My two boys are grown up now. Unfortunately, they don't have any steady relationship, girlfriends, so I don't think they will get any children in the near future. And for me, that's okay, because I've told them that I'm doing really well and I plan to stay around for a long time. So there's no big hurry. Thank you very much. And I wish you the best if you're a PH patient, and same for you that are carers. Bye-bye.